In the atheist community, Jordan Peterson is perhaps most famous for his constant redefining of the term God. He explains it in many different ways, such as these.
God is how we imaginatively and collectively represent the existence and action of consciousness across time, as the most real aspects of existence manifest themselves across the longest of time frames, but are not necessarily apprehensible as objects in the here and now. God is that which eternally dies and is reborn in the pursuit of higher being and truth. That's a fundamental element of hero mythology. God is the highest value in the hierarchy of values. God is what calls and what responds in the eternal call to adventure. God is the voice of conscience. God is the source of judgment and mercy and guilt. God is the future to which we make sacrifices and something akin to the transcendental repository of reputation. God is that which selects among men in the eternal hierarchy of men.
With Jordan Peterson's continual pushing of this new definition of God, the atheistic community seems to be the most up in arms about it, many claiming different things about Jordan Peterson's own worldview and beliefs.
Jordan Peterson seems, to me, to be an atheist. I mean, he thinks that God is a fictional character.
God is the ultimate fictional character.
And that religious scripture is true, but only true in the sense that it contains a meaningful message that speaks to the human experience, regardless of its historicity.
Turns out that after months of vague rhetoric, countless word salads, and incessant evasion, that all he's done is redefine every damn word of importance in order to make his position coherent. I find this incredibly disingenuous.
In this video, I'm simply going to explain why Jordan Peterson's redefinition of God is entirely free game and that he's allowed to do it. In fact, it's extremely relevant to academia. In a future video, I will dive into the details of Jordan Peterson's definition so that we can better understand what it is he's trying to say. Generally, public discourse abides by certain logical rules that are kind of implicit so that we can be on the same page. In logical argumentation, there's really only a few instances where you would go about redefining a word. One method of doing so is a stipulative definition. This is with the purpose of explaining a very complex term with a simpler definition. Another reason to change a definition of a term is theoretical, which is exactly what it sounds like. And the last is precising. This is done so to reduce the vagueness of a word. In my opinion, Jordan Peterson's redefining of the term God fits both theoretical definition requirements and precising definition purposes. So we can back up even a little bit further and consider what the purpose of a definition really is. In my opinion, redefining terms is completely reasonable in public discourse. We do it all the time, and it's even required in academia as we learn new information about reality. For example, if we are in a void in what we currently understand as a dog is the only thing that exists in that void, and it's our responsibility to define it, there's going to be a better and a worse definition, specifically in the definition's ability to reflect reality. Let's say I define the dog as having 4 legs, a tail, 2 ears, eyes, a mammal, but you say that the real definition of a dog is a reptile with 9 legs, 5 different tails, 2 wings. Clearly, one definition is better at reflecting and encapsulating the reality of what a dog is than the other definition. Jordan Peterson's implicit argument is that there is a better definition of God that is more reflective of that reality and that we should be moving toward that. There's nothing wrong with this perspective. Let me provide you with an example. In ancient times, stars were defined as being angels or gods and goddesses that floated around in a firmament far above the earth. Now our definition of stars are celestial burning balls of gas that exist millions of miles away. Obviously, our definition today is more accurate in reflecting the reality of what a star really is. That doesn't mean that when there was a redefining process that everybody agreed with the new definition. There was a point in history where people disagreed on what a star was, and that is completely fine. We can have multiple definitions that exist at once, especially if we're in the pursuit of better understanding. I think one of the biggest issues when we're looking at redefining the term God is that atheists and theists, obviously, are on completely different pages in what God means. The atheist sees God as a concept, so redefining a concept is like redefining the word responsibility or redefining the word equality. They already have set definitions that we'd agreed upon, and so there's no reason to change it because the underlying concept has not changed. The theist, on the other hand, raises God into an untouchable realm where any redefining of the term God is deemed sacrilegious, and I think both of these perspectives are equally wrong. First is that the atheist gets their definition most commonly from the religion that they deconverted from. So I love asking fellow atheists, why do you hold on to the definition of a religion that you don't even agree with? The problem, as I mentioned before, is that the definition of God gets conceptualized as just that, just a thought, just a concept, something that cannot change. And if you want to oppose the theist perspective, which a lot of atheists obviously want to do, then you have to take the polar opposite position that the theist takes, because there is no middle ground in the theist point of view. And just like that, the atheists and the theists are on opposite ends of the spectrum and equally far from the truth. There are tons of different variations of the term God that already exist, which is more evidence for the fact that we can redefine God and nothing bad is going to happen. For example, if you ask a theologian what God is, depending first on their theological orientation and what religion they're currently studying, they're going to come up with a different definition, most commonly some kind of creator of the universe that is outside space and time. If you ask an anthropologist, they may argue that God is a concept that was used to reinforce certain beneficial social behaviors for the ultimate goal of social cohesion. If you ask a biologist, they may say that God is a manifestation of a fundamental misinterpretation of reality, a misinterpretation that is in some way beneficial to the survival of the species. From this, we see a few things. First, alternate definitions of God already exist in various areas of academia, and atheists will even agree with these different definitions of God. We also see, obviously, that these definitions encapsulate an entirely different perspective of God than traditional religious definitions do. Jordan Peterson is simply bringing to life a more psychological definition of what God is, and honestly, he's not doing anything new. This definition has existed for decades, for centuries, and it's really based on the work of a few guys such as Carl Jung. So far I've argued that it's completely reasonable and completely fair what Jordan Peterson is doing when he's presenting an alternate definition of what God is. I think people have a huge adverse reaction to that, because for the atheists, they want to hold on to the position that God is nothing, and Jordan Peterson seems to be elevating that, not, I don't think, into the realm of divinity, but into a different realm that the atheist is uncomfortable with, and that's why he gets backlash. And for Christians, they tend to side with Jordan Peterson because, again, he's moving that definition closer towards them, so they're more likely to agree with it. So now let me argue why exploring a psychological definition of God is, in my opinion, the best perspective to take on this phenomenon that we call God. First is that experiences of reality are mediated through the mind, and there's no other option. There's no way around this fact. Let's explore a couple of examples of when this goes wrong in order to understand just how impactful the mind-brain complex is for the human experience of reality. So certain psychological and neurological disorders will actually result in the individual not being able to recognize oneself. Literally, the individual will look into a mirror and not understand who it is that's looking back at them. They won't be able to recognize who they are at all. They may actually be able to recognize other people, but not themselves, which is, again, it's a very specific, very particular psychological reality. Other disorders may have the exact same effect, but on various body parts. You might, for example, believe that your leg is not yours, or that your arm does not belong to you, or that you have a third arm that extends out of your chest. Furthermore, certain disorders result in paralysis of various body parts, despite there being no physiological basis for the paralysis. The paralysis is entirely psychological. These are just a few examples of how the brain literally constructs every single aspect of our reality, even the most fundamental ones that we take for granted. So when we have a ton of different people saying that, yo, this guy rose from the dead, we should be looking at that first through the lens of psychology, not history or logic or biology. And let me warn you, once we get into the world of psychology, things become exceptionally more complex, and some of the most basic assumptions we hold about reality dissolve. I don't want this video to be like an hour long, and so Jordan Peterson's redefinition of the term God will be revisited in a future video where I will get into the details of his definition and explain exactly what that means in relation to our understanding of psychology. So be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see that future video. That's all I have for today. I will see you guys on the next one.